Hi everyone and welcome to August's video tarot forecast. I am going to do a very quick overview of the way that the cards are laid out. I know many of you have heard this many times before, but there are new people among you, so it's a good idea just to recap. We have a 3-card reading. I always do 3-card readings, and the left-hand card, which is the one that I draw first, is the foundation. That is something that has already happened. It's not something that's going to happen. So when you see that card, don't think about what's coming up. Think about what's happened in the near past. It could be further back, but it will definitely be still having an influence on you right now. So the reason for the foundation is not really so much what happened as what it's doing to you now, or how it's shifted things, how it's casting a different kind of light on the way that things are for you today, both inside and outside. So the foundation is very important because it's really what you're bringing into the reading. The prevailing theme, obviously you're bringing in many things to a reading, but the prevailing theme is the one that's going to interact with the second card in the most alchemical way. So the second card being the current weather. This is what you are in right now. I am going to consider this the theme of the month. So the current weather is really what's going on in August for you as a prevailing theme. It's one of the ones that is going to have the biggest impact on you. And as I've said before, this doesn't necessarily mean that the card is going to feature very largely in a most obvious way in your life. Rather, it's going to be something that has an impact perhaps at a deeper level. So it may be more subtle in terms of how it appears to you in your everyday life, but the effect is going to be profound. And that is something then that you carry forward with you. I'd say that this prevailing theme will last for the next 4 weeks or so, but it lasts forever because whatever happens you take with you. So it's very interesting doing timings and tarot because you can do things, you can do certain events that happen as a one-off, but as you know, when those events are significant, they leave their mark on you, and you can't unremember them. You can't be the person that you were before. So really, the foundation that you're bringing in, and then the current weather mixes together and gives you something that you take forward with you permanently. And then the final card number 3, is the place where you get to be the boss a little bit in the reading. I know we like to feel like we're the boss most of the time, and most of the time I don't believe that we are really the boss of our own lives. It's just that things tend to ease or go along in the way that we expect them to most of the time. But when something unexpected happens, whether something comes at you from outside or whether something comes out of you from inside, you frequently realize in those moments that you're not necessarily, the conscious you is not necessarily the one who's running the show. However, the third card is the card that I like to be able to bring in as the agency card. So it's where you can work with what's going on. It's not to work against it so much as to work with it. So you smooth things over with this card if things are a little bit rough in terms of how you're experiencing things, or you can move with it in a way that reduces friction as well if things are if it's an encouraging set of cards that you have before. It's how to harness it in the best possible way, how to mitigate it in the best possible way, but where you are aligning with it rather than trying to control it. So those are the 3 cards. I have shuffled the deck, I have set the intentions, and I'm going to draw the 3 cards face down as always. I will turn them over one at a time and we'll go from there. So cutting the deck, and I feel like we need to draw one from each. And we need to draw from underneath the deck today for a few of them. Right, so this is your foundation card. This is the card that you are coming into the reading with. And that card is the Hierophant. Major Arcana card. The way that I read, you're dealing with the collective unconscious where it intersects the personal unconscious. Or to put it in another way, you're dealing with something that's really quite deep down. It may be more difficult to access. I'm going to use the metaphor of the boat again. if the unconscious is the ocean and you are the boat on the ocean, it's not something where you can dip your fingers in just below the water and pull it out, you know, I don't know, like a jellyfish, if you really want to pull a jellyfish out. But it's something that you can possibly see. If you look over the side of the boat, you can see it swimming deeper underneath you. Or you may not even necessarily be able to see it, but you can feel it. You can feel how it moves. It moves the boat. It could be a wave. It could be something like that. So in other words, waves sometimes when you're on a boat is not necessarily able to be identified visually, but you can feel it. And this is the same thing with the major arcana cards. And the Hierophant, being the fifth arcana, major arcana, is really one of those ones at the beginning of the major arcana when we are still learning not only to define ourselves in terms of our own soul, in terms of our own path, but also to define the roles that we play, or the roles that we need to assume, or the things that we need to do in order to become more integrated so that we can step onto the path. And when those challenges face us, the ones that are less personal, the ones that are transpersonal, the rites of passage that happen to us as we go through the aging process and our soul's evolution, those cards at the beginning are the ones that stand us in good stead, because they are the foundational cards. They are the personality-based cards and the modes and means of going through life. And the Hierophant is aligning with something that is greater than you in terms of meaning. So you've gone from the Emperor, which is being able to assert authority in your own world, and the Emperor has just very recently come up. So you've had the Emperor, where you are defining who you are and who you are in your world, but not only that, but how your world looks and how you want things to be and how you want things to behave. Not necessarily how you want others to behave. I mean, you can be, then you're a despot and not an emperor. And that's very much a shade of the Emperor if that comes out. But the Emperor is one's own personal space and one's own personal laws and man-made laws. The Hierophant, the Emperor steps away to make room for the Hierophant, because then those laws give way to divine laws. So the Emperor almost butts up against the Hierophant sometimes and realizes that there needs to be a sense of surrendering that authority to a higher authority, or rather, again, and I'm going to use the word align your authority to a higher authority. Hopefully, if you are emperor enough and you've learnt what authority is, then also part of that authority is to defer to an inner authority that is dictated by something that goes beyond you, that maybe goes beyond some kind of explanation, but certainly has a pull to it, or that you feel attracted to it, or it feels like a path that you want to follow. It is a commitment that you make to something that is greater than yourself, and that's the Hierophant. It's essentially, I mean, from a more classical point of view, the Hierophant is often portrayed as the Pope. So the Pope then, I know, has many negative connotations now, but let's see it from an archetypal point of view, and then we can go on to the negative connotations. The archetypal point of view is that the Pope stands between divine law and human law. The Pope is there to enact divine law or God's law on earth, and in fact is the spokesperson for that. So the Hierophant is there as the spokesperson for divine law as it is enacted in the human realm. So in other words, it is your spiritual aspect as it is enacted in your life. It is how you choose to apply, to work with, to embody spirituality, but one that is deeply meaningful for you. That is something that may well have happened, is that there has been this path that's open to you that has given you a glimpse into something that is greater than yourself, that feels like you need to follow or you want to follow. It may have come in the form of a hunch, a practice, a person, but it is where you understand that the life of the Emperor is not really enough in order to feel like a whole person, in order to feel like you that your realm is complete. And so then the Hierophant comes along and then starts to make these sometimes gentle, sometimes persistent demands that there is something that you need to step up to that is greater than yourself. I alluded to the shadow Hierophant, and that is really where something masquerades as something else. So, for example, I've just been scrolling through Facebook, and somebody has posted an article about a guru, yet another one of those gurus who has fallen from grace because they have made demands on their followers that have transgressed the very laws that they've probably first set out to represent. Except then they go and change the laws. They go and say, well, this is actually what is supposed to happen, and so therefore you need to follow me, otherwise you're no longer going to belong. If you notice that with the Shadow Hierophant, there's also a bit of the Shadow Emperor there then as well. You get the Emperor almost interceding on the space of the Hierophant and going, well, actually, I'm in charge here, and you need to listen to what I have to say, and I say this, and you need to follow, otherwise you're out. And the Hierophant, when he comes up in his shadow form, then becomes a tyrant, becomes a charismatic tyrant sometimes. But the Hierophant itself as a pure archetype is really that call to path, that call for that kind of devotion to something. And so when you feel that pull perhaps off the path onto the path of some kind of tyrant, then it's worth going back to the idea of what the Hierophant really means. And the Hierophant is aligning with something greater than yourself, not by forcing something greater than yourself into who you are and then suggesting that you are greater than anything else that's around you and people need to listen to you, or an aspect of you feels that, or somebody else is saying that to you. So this is foundational. Remember that. That's not coming up. This is something that's happened, but it is still having an influence on you. So whether that's an influence of expansion and this feeling of alignment with something greater, or coming out feeling rather stung from an experience that was probably more shadow than light, it's something that's informing the way that we're going to be interacting with the second card. So yes, bear in mind, major arcana could be subtle. So it doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your face. It may have been in your face, but otherwise it could be subtle. And remember, also, actually, it's worth bearing in mind: the spiritual path is anything that feels meaningful to you, that takes you into a realm that is not simply the personal, that takes you in and connects you with something that you feel is the mystery. So very often with the Hierophant. Not in this card, but definitely in the Rider-Waite-Smith, there are the two monks at the feet of the Pope, and one of them is wearing lilies. That's the path of the renunciate. That's the typical kind of path that you would think that a monk would go to. Sequesters himself in a monastery, takes away, the poverty, chastity, and obedience oaths. So it's really to get rid of everything. Then there is the monk on the other side, which is wearing roses, who's wearing roses. And that is the path of immersion. That's the path of Tantra. That's the path of anything goes, or anything goes that you permit it to be. But it is the full experience of the lived life on every level. So the spiritual path does not necessarily have to be one where you wear sackcloth and you go and scrub floors for 12 hours a day in between prayers and silence and chanting. It is immersion as well. So that is the foundation. That's what you're bringing in, the path of learning. And this is what it's going to interact with. Pull this card up individually. Strive, the Five of Wands. Okay, now this is interesting. I always like the fact that Carl Röhrig has, who designed these cards, calls this card Strive, and I'm never quite sure whether it's a breakdown in communication because his first language is not English, because the card is typically called Strife. But I'm going to take it the way that it is, because I rather like the idea of strive rather than strife. And in fact, the image on the card is one of striving rather than strife. So you can see here the 5 wands, 3 on one side, 2 on the other. There's an imbalance there implicit in that. And there is this sort of metallic red hot kind of dry heat in this cavern under the ground that is reflective of the colours above. Now, wands are libidinal energy. They are the oomph that gets us going or stops us, because libidinal energy can either work for us or against us if we are looking at it in purely judgmental terms. It's either something that is comes up as a form of creativity or comes up as a form of resistance. And the Strive card is really that meeting of resistance for the first time. So you've had the Ace of Wands, which is pure ignition. It is the potential of any kind of libidinal expression in this world, but yet we still have to draw it down into the 2, which is dominion, which is, I think, Mars and Aries, and that is being able to use that energy in order to form your world. It's a very Emperor-like card. And then the 3 is setting out on your journey. Once your world is formed, you're then starting to shape it as you go along, and it's really about forming your own path. And then the 4 is that pause in order to cross a threshold and move into something else, but it is definitely a threshold of a kind, but it's that waiting before. And then the 5 is the complexity that comes in when you suddenly meet the idea of the wands in a different form, which is this resistance. And so Strive is striving against that resistance. And in fact, if you can see on the card, and I'm sorry, the light is really rather awful here, it's very early in the morning, but there is a hand that is reaching up. It's almost as if you've been sort of in a subterranean place, or you've been taking this energy which is hidden. So there's a sense of that repressed or pushed down energy, and you're pushing up through the earth. And then there is this hand there that is aligning with the 2 wands on the, on my screen it's the left-hand side. Yes, it is the left-hand side of the card. And that creates a kind of balance, because it creates a kind of quasi-3rd wand. So you've got the 6 wands there, per se. So there's a balance being re-established by you taking a hand in things, quite literally. It is about trying to get to grips with what it is that's going on that feels possibly either oppressive, but probably more slightly confusing or chaotic, because there is this idea of breaking out from underground. So not being able to see entirely clearly, but being able to feel the idea of these wands acting. I'm going to go back to the Rider-Waite-Smith card again, because I think it's a really nice parallel with this. It's the 5 young lads who are trying their utmost to build a pentacle or a pentagram with these 5 wands, and not quite getting there because nobody is in charge. Okay, so there is this ideal that's being striven for or strived for, and yet it is not quite happening because something needs to step forward and take charge. Well, you've got the perfect foundational card there. We'll bring it in. You've got the foundational card of the Hierophant, and what I love here is if you look at the cards, the Hierophant is really in the place where that underground energy is sort of coalescing in this sort of red hot dry, I was going to say red hot dry mess, but in a way it is. So, and yet the Hierophant is this clear, blue, aligned, full-faced, you know, knowing, knowledgeable, wise, grounded figure of this master. And I think that the reminder here then is when you hit that idea of strife is to strive, is to be able to remember why it is that you are doing what you're doing, is to go back to that sense of the Hierophant. Now the Hierophant may be an enabler. He may be something or a quality in you, and it has to be in you, because yes, it may be coming at you from somewhere else, somewhere outside you, a personality, an authority figure. But unless and until you bring it inside, then there isn't that alignment with one's own spiritual authority, or then you're aligning with somebody else's authority. So the Hierophant is that aspect of you, and if you can remember and tap into, and the Hierophant is Taurus. So it's embodied, you know, it's acted out. It's a very solid, grounded card. If you can remember that in your body, in the way that things feel, in that sense of alignment, and really try and feel that alignment inside you, where there is this line literally moving through you, but it's not just in you, it extends from beyond and below you, and up through you, and then up and out into something above you. You know, and when you are aligned, you can feel that in your voice, you can feel that in your actions. That's the Hierophant working through you. Very often when you are out of alignment, you'll lose your voice, and you will quite literally feel like you're losing your voice. I might have brought this up as an example before, but I've often seen this, and I experienced it myself very unsettlingly, that when I was trying to discipline my child when I was younger, and you often see people disciplining their children in a totally unaligned way. So there's a lot of shrieking, and even the voice sounds different. The voice quality sounds different. There's a loss of energy. It's almost as if, as I've said before, the words just fall onto the floor when you are speaking. They don't really reach your target. And you can find this in an argument with somebody. You can find this particularly in an argument with somebody where you perceive them as an authority figure. Even if they aren't, you've conferred that authority onto them. When you are aligned with the Hierophant, your voice is authoritative because it is coming from somewhere deep inside you. And those words reach their target in the same way that when you're disciplining a child, you don't need to raise your voice. You just say something with that authority and you are heard. It is received. So I am suggesting here that with this idea of this feeling, this need to push through something, to create something out of some kind of sense of resistance, there is that going back to an authority that is inside you, that reminder of what the Hierophant is all about and how that is going to help you to push through this resistance and create that alignment to bring you into the 6 of Wands there, you see, because that hand again is forming that 6th stave, and then the 6 is different. That then shifts into a breakthrough. So this is going to come up differently for you. All of you who are listening, I am very interested. If you want to reach out, you can do that to explain to me, or they'll tell me how you feel that this is, even if you can feel something as a felt sense, but you're not sure quite how it's manifesting. Then you can message me, private message me, email me on my website, and if you want to have some clarity or just a sounding board for that, because it can sometimes be difficult not only to feel that sense of the 5 because it's trying to see the forest for the trees, because the perspective here is it's from underground, as you can see, but also from the perspective of it's difficult to see the forest for the trees sometimes when you're working with a major arcana card. So you've got that going on. This is so the foundation meeting the current weather. There's that sense of having to push through a certain amount of resistance, and what's implied is that it is possible. Okay, this reading is not about it being an impossible thing you need to give up. That's a different set of cards. This is about taking off in an aeroplane and hitting a headwind that's really very strong and possibly quite turbulent, and to be able to then work with the currents in order to ride that turbulence through, in order to, in fact, sometimes work with the turbulence in order to move where you're going. So that's really, I think that's an image that's worth bearing in mind. And now we have finally the tool that you can use, the one that's really going to step forward this month for you to be able to work with this headwind and align with that that idea of the current of the Hierophant that is there, that's guiding you all along. And there you go, the Princess of Discs. This is grounding. This is grounding into your body. This is feeling your body, feeling something nascent inside you, nascent, birthing, that is not yet quite ready to be birthed, but is there. It is self-protection. It is nurturing. But as you can see, she is the very earthy colours. She is a very earthy woman. I mean, you know, her full breasts. She is mothering, but she's also young. So she's a young mother. She is the sort of maiden becoming the mother. But she is also blindfolded with these, what looks like sort of corn sheaves, or the corn covers. She's blindfolded with that. There is a sense of going back to nature in order to go within, to be able to connect with something outside in nature that allows you then to connect with something inside, to understand that actually the margin between outside and inside is non-existent. You are nature. You are nature. You are birthing something that is natural in you. And so that may feel that sense of waiting, but you can definitely feel a sense of something there. So the Princess of Discs is really about bringing something into the world, and I mean into the world physically. This is a physical manifestation of something. Well, you will be able to see its effects in the world. This is discs, it's pentacles, it's the most solid of all of the, and in fact you can see her belly is very much there holding that disc. Her belly's sort of become a caricature of a disc. So it's very clear that what she is bringing through is the ace. What she's bringing through is the potential for something to come through. She is the conduit through which you can bring through the highest potential for a material manifestation of something that really serves you and the world. It is going to be something that is really quite important in your world, and something that is there to work with you. It may feel other, it may feel frightening, it may feel like something that you're carrying that isn't yours, or that there is a sense of, my goodness, what is this? I mean, look at that. It looks slightly unnatural. I would suggest that actually the idea of this is to align with the fact that the reason it feels unnatural is because it is coming from beyond. And therefore the ego will want to fight that and say, this doesn't belong here, it doesn't belong to me. Well, actually, that's when you go out in nature. That's when you understand your place in things. The Hierophant and the Princess of Discs work really well together, because the Hierophant is really that, that archetypal sense of bringing something through, and the Princess of Discs is the genesis of bringing something through. So I'm just going to hold up the Hierophant and the Princess of Discs together. Very different. Very different, and yet. And I quite like the contrasted difference. And yet there is this paradoxical allowing of something to come through that is the union of both of them. Given the Hierophant is Taurus, the Princess of Discs, be interesting to see, might be a Taurian kind of figure as well. Definitely an earth sign. Then it really is something that that might look very different from what it is that you've been feeling in the Hierophant, because you're bringing it into mortal form. And so there is that archetype of mother. So when you put the three cards up together, they are really very different. But what I see there is the alignment of the the Hierophant's knowing wise face. Where his hand is holding up to where the hand will come out in strive. And that white light that is there, that inspiration that is waiting to be birthed through that sense of resistance. And then, of course, the Princess of Discs that actually births that through that very resistance, because birth itself is all to do with resistance, that birth passage, which you can see in the central card, really being the way that pushes. So it's felt as both the channel through which something is born, but there is a tremendous amount of pressure there as well that then pushes up and out. And there's that hand that reaches there. So fear not, it might feel a little bit weird, a little bit strange. It might feel like you're under pressure. Remember where it was that you were inspired by something greater than yourself, and then remember what it is like to be a child of nature. Get out there, remember, so that you reconnect to something where it feels meaningful rather than other. Because this is working for you, not against you. The Six of Wands is really implied next. I'm going to leave it there. And please welcome all your comments, your questions, and I will send, in the meantime, much love, and I will see you in September. Go well, and enjoy the process if you can. Remember, when you feel that sense of friction, go back to the Hierophant. That's birth. Get outside in nature. You'll find the Hierophant and your connection there more strongly than anywhere else, I feel, particularly with the Princess of Discs. Go well.